You are listening to the daily homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
There was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem, at the Sheep Gate, a pool called in Hebrew Bethesda, with 5 porticos. In this lay a large number of ill, blind, lame, and crippled. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had been ill for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I am on my way, someone else gets down there before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your mat and walk." Immediately the man became well, took up his mat and walked. Now that day was a Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to carry your mat." He answered them, "The man who made me well told me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who told you, take it up and walk?" The man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away since there was a crowd there. After this, Jesus found him in the temple area and said to him, "Look, you are well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went and told the Jews that Jesus was the one who had made him well. Therefore, the Jews began to persecute Jesus because he did this on a Sabbath. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Those who come to be pilgrims in the Holy Land can relate to these two readings in a much more concrete way than if we don't come here. And for me, they were both very significant discoveries. This reading of Ezekiel, you have to be in the area of Gethsemane looking at the Temple Mount, and you see the door on the east where the temple was standing, and more or less that's where the water was coming out. And then you can go down the Kidron Valley. I've hiked that valley many times. It stinks in the summertime because it carries the black water from the city. And it's there are also other complications nowadays to walk down through there because it's blocked with the wall. But it's fascinating then to know that relationship, how that, and Ezekiel is told by the angel, I think we didn't have that part in the reading, to come to the north of the city. That means to come out the northern gate, which would more or less correspond with the Damascus gate, and to go around to the east. So you could kind of walk this reading in Jerusalem of Ezekiel 47. And then you start going down the Kidron Valley, and the water is up to your ankles. And then it's up to your knees, and then it's up to your waist, and then you're going down to the Dead Sea. They call it the Salty Sea. And there are a couple of lines missing from here, because otherwise it would be very long. And it's about the comments how there are more fishermen from Ein Gedi to Ein Gelim. Nobody knows where is Ein Gelim nowadays, what place was meant by that term in the time of Ezekiel, 6 centuries before Christ. But there were so many fishermen on the Dead Sea. What were they doing there? Well, it was filled with fish. There were more fish there than in the Great Sea. What was the Great Sea? The Mediterranean. So it's this, and then he comes back, and on both sides of the banks there are fruit trees growing, and they give a new harvest every month. And all the leaves are for healing. And the water that made this happen came out from under the altar. That's also a little bit, I think you can be present here in Duc In Altum, and you see how this chapel is on the water all around, and you're there, the water is coming from under the altar. It's beautiful. And the water in these regions is so important for life. So this richness of water and the fruitfulness of water and the idea of the water then as an image for grace coming from God to give life again to our souls. And then not very far away is then the house, where we have the Church of Our Lady, what's it called? Bethesda, the pools of Bethesda, and the birth of the Church of St. Anna, the mother of Mary, right? Mary's house. And another very important little thing archaeologically is that people were saying that John's Gospel, which we're reading from today, in chapter 5, that this story about the porticos was just symbolic because John is very symbolic. And they also, two discoveries archaeologically made a huge difference in exegesis on John's Gospel. One was the discovery of the Pilate stone with Pilate's name in Caesarea, in the big theater. It was used as a step turned upside down to walk on top of him by people who thought they could this way show their Christian faith. It's a different attitude, thanks be to God, today. But the fact is that stone was original, and it's now in the Israel Museum. There's a copy there on the site. And so it's, they were saying that, this was a figment of the imagination, that there's no historical source for Pilate, but that stone was a big discovery. And another big discovery that was very important for John's Gospel was the theory that he was just talking about symbolic porticos, and they were trying to interpret meanings, but then the archaeology proved they were there in the last century. And so these are very important concrete things, how the archaeology comes to be also an evidence, it gives an evidence for the rationality, for the credibility of the story, that it's not just a myth, it's not just mythological, it's not just giving us an idea, there's concrete history because the Word is made flesh and dwelt among us in a concrete time, in a concrete place. And that's why people come here, to be in those places and to understand these relationships, also the spatial relationships, the culture, and many other aspects. So then, if we come again to the Gospel of John from another angle, you remember when David was coming to take Jerusalem from the Jebusites. And he must look like a very miserable army, because they were laughing at him. He said, we have no problem defending against you. The blind and the lame can defend against you and won't let you into the city of the Jebusites. There are only two miracles of Jesus in Jerusalem. One is to heal the lame man, and the other to heal the blind man that went to the pool of Siloam. So this is a very interesting fact, because it's also building on the story of David and what was said to David. And now the son of David comes, and he doesn't beat the blind and the lame and take over the city. He gives them life. He fills them with life. And I think with these two readings today, when the blind man goes, the crippled man, the paralyzed man goes into the water and he's healed, the waters of life, because Jesus said he did in faith in Jesus. Then here we have, we remember another line combining with the Ezekiel piece, when Jesus says that drink from this fountain of water and fountains of water will spring up inside of you. We need to wade into the water that's coming from the temple of God. How do we do that? Prayer. We need to wade into the water, up to our ankles, up to our knees, up to our waist. We need to swim in the water coming out of the altar of God. And that's, first of all, baptism. We are completely renewed, a fullness of new life. And sometimes we forget how powerfully renewing is that for our lives. That renews us completely. And then that a fountain of water springs up in us. So our words become a fountain of life for others. Not just our words. First of all, our life that's completely transformed. Our paralysis is over. Our capacity to love is no longer paralyzed by fears, by complexes, by our own histories, by our own sins, we can love. Go out into the deep. Duc In Altum. Go out and do good deeds, kind deeds. It takes a lot to overcome our tiredness, to overcome emotions that we don't like this people or that people, to love them. We don't have any enemy in this world. Any human being is an enemy. None of them. They're all our brothers and sisters. Some of them are paralyzed. Some of them are taken over by ideologies. Some of them have become violent. Some of them have become addicted. But they're all our brothers and sisters. They're not our enemies. And we can be like Jesus, ready to lay down our life for them. We have to be completely renewed by this water, completely welled up, filling up with life, bubbling, spurting out, fountain of water for a parched world in our time.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.